What comes to mind when the name Sun Tzu is mentioned? Battlefields, generals, and perhaps those famous strategy quotes shared on LinkedIn by bosses who've never actually read his book. Most people think of him as a philosopher of victory, a mystical master who unlocked the codes of conflict. But can I tell you a secret? This perspective misses the point entirely. When you toss aside the slogans and the legends, you find someone quite unconventional. Sun Tzu wasn't obsessed with winning battles. He was obsessed with avoiding them. Glory, fame, or world domination didn't matter to him. He had only one concern: money. In a world bleeding from constant warfare, Sun Tzu was the first person to put the painful truth everyone was avoiding right on the table. The greatest danger to a state isn't the enemy in front of you. The real danger is the bill that comes after the war is over. People think the art of war is about fighting. In reality, this book is, from start to finish, about finance. Welcome to the Wealth Archives, where money, power, and history collide. Here, nothing is as simple as it looks. Historical context, the crisis environment. To understand Sun Tzu's financial genius, we first need to look at the world he lived in. Because these ideas didn't just fall from the sky, they were born in a world suffering under the weight of its own ambitions. Let's travel back to 6th and 5th century BC China. It's chaos. Kingdoms are fractured. Everyone says, "I will be the ruler of the world." But in reality, they are all on the brink of bankruptcy. War never ends. Armies grow larger every decade. The skirmishes fought by nobles in chariots are gone, replaced by massive armies of hundreds of thousands of soldiers. These men need food, armor, income. So, states weren't just fighting. They were essentially applying a stress test to their economies. Whenever a king said attack, he was actually mortgaging his future, taking out a massive loan from the treasury. And most of the time, they had no power to repay that loan. In movies, we watch ancient wars as tales of heroism. But in that era, war meant, above all else, logistics. The moment the army set off, the meter started running. The blacksmith, the cook, the porter, the horse, they all needed money. If a campaign lasted more than a few months, a small state would go bankrupt. If it lasted more than a year, even great empires would collapse. This is the world Sun Tzu walked into. He wasn't a philosopher sitting on a mountainside. He was a strategist trying to solve an economic crisis disguised as a military one. Sun Tzu, the risk manager of the ancient world. In the West, we view him as a cool CEO coach, but in reality, he was closer to a risk manager. He took pen and paper. He looked at the numbers, the logistics, the costs, and he saw this. Gentlemen, this trajectory is unsustainable. If your treasury runs empty, winning the war has no meaning. But the kings didn't want to understand this. They thought the biggest threat was the enemy army. Sun Tzu said, "No, the biggest threat is your own expenses." That is why, at the very beginning of the art of war, before he even talks about deception or terrain, do you know what he says? War is a matter of vital importance to the state. Meaning, it is dangerous, it is destructive, and it is capable of bankrupting the very society it claims to protect. The rest of the book is essentially a savings guide. It explains how to limit war and how to finish it cheaply. Think of his most famous quotes. They are all actually economics lessons in disguise. For example, when he said, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting," he wasn't philosophizing. He was teaching us cost avoidance. He was saying, Get the result you want, but don't burn your capital. When he said, "There is no instance of a country having benefited from prolonged warfare," this wasn't a prophecy, it was a mathematical fact. As the campaign drags on, the state's coffers melt away. Why did he place so much importance on speed, spies, and psychological pressure? Because these were much cheaper than feeding a massive army. Sun Tzu wasn't trying to win wars, he was trying to prevent states from going bankrupt while trying to win wars. War is a balance sheet. This thought was an incredible revolution for its time. While everyone was talking about honor, glory, courage, Sun Tzu was emphasizing a balance sheet. Supply chains, opportunity costs, resource management. He thought of these centuries before the terms even existed. When you read The Art of War through this lens, that is, through an economist's eye, the book stops being poetry and turns into an Excel spreadsheet. He mentions 5 fundamental factors in the book: the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, method, and discipline. These aren't mystical things. These are resource management categories. He is actually asking, what is your budget? How resilient are your people? How solid is your bureaucracy? The subject of logistics was so important that he calculated the cost of feeding an army down to the penny. His logic was very simple. The further you get from home, the more the cost multiplies. The cost of transporting provisions drains the treasury faster than soldiers' wages. He even warns rulers, forage on the enemy. Eat the enemy's food if possible. He doesn't say this just to be annoying. He says this is a financial necessity to protect your own budget. Information is the cheapest weapon. His approach to intelligence was also entirely about money. Today, governments defend intelligence budgets as security. Sun Tzu called it efficiency. His logic was this: a few pennies given to a spy can prevent a massive army from marching in the wrong direction and wasting millions of dollars. Today, we call this data. He called it foreknowledge. Sun Tzu was the first person to realize this. Information is the cheapest and most effective weapon you can possess. Not spending money on information is throwing your capital in the trash. The subject of speed is the same. When he said speed is the essence of war, he wasn't saying be aggressive. He was saying be fast so costs don't spiral. Every day you wait, you are burning money. Victory won through maneuver is more profitable than victory won through fighting. The modern world and conclusion. Sun Tzu was not against war, he was against waste. And the biggest waste is fighting a war you don't have to fight. History is full of the graveyards of those who didn't listen to Sun Tzu. Kingdoms that drained their treasuries for the sake of honor or stubbornness disappeared. Those who viewed war as a financial instrument remained standing. And here, the story escapes ancient history and comes to the present day. The uncomfortable truth is this: modern states are still making the mistakes Sun Tzu tried to prevent. They enter wars without calculating the long-term bill. Why do you think the Soviets lost in Afghanistan or America in Vietnam? Because their soldiers were weak? No, because the economic model behind them collapsed. Prolonged war rots a state faster than the enemy can. The cyber warfare, sanctions, and proxy wars we see today, they are all actually Sun Tzu's tactics. Why? Because they are cheaper. Maximum damage for minimum money. The world's superpowers, whether they admit it or not, are still playing according to Sun Tzu's balance sheet. In conclusion, Sun Tzu taught us this: Being strong isn't about how hard you hit. Being strong is about whether you can keep the money to strike that blow in your pocket. In Sun Tzu's world, if the treasury goes bankrupt afterward, victory has no meaning. The best war is the one where you don't have to repair your economy when it's over. This isn't a warrior's philosophy. This is the philosophy of a steward, the man protecting the state's coffers. His message is simple and still valid. Courage without economic discipline is just suicide. They say history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. If you don't understand it, the bill will be the same for you. If this video added something new to your perspective, hit the subscribe button, because the answers are always hidden in history.